It's a very warm welcome to all our viewers and welcome to a new edition of Africa Today, a program that brings you all the latest news and events happening inside the African continent. My name is Angie Meher and I'll be joining you this afternoon. Of course, as usual, we have a lot in store for you, so let's start straight away with a look at some of the news making the headlines, starting with news from home. So far, Egypt has registered 125,555 cases of COVID-19 officially since February of this year, including the 7,098 fatalities and the 106,817 recoveries. Health officials say certain factors could necessitate a new coronavirus lockdown if they materialize simultaneously. We have more details in this report.
Dr. Ahmed Shawqi, a member of the scientific committee following the coronavirus in Egypt, said the country may impose a new lockdown if certain factors materialize simultaneously amid the peak of the second wave. He said if Egypt reaches the peak of the second wave of COVID-19 and there is no more capacity at hospitals to deal with new cases of the coronavirus, whether in the ICUs or other sections, in addition to an ongoing increase in the number of coronavirus cases and fatalities over the week, all those cases will be met and confronted with a lockdown, especially if the vaccine is not available to all. Shawqi said according to the number of infections and fatalities, a precautionary measure will be taken, and this will be agreed upon in coordination between the Ministry and the Supreme Committee for Crisis Management. In the last 5 weeks, Egypt witnessed an increase in the number of coronavirus cases as well as fatalities. So far, the authorities have registered 125,555 cases of coronavirus since February, including 7,098 fatalities and 106,817 recoveries. In the past 2 weeks, ministries, public sector institutions, as well as private sector banks and companies returned to employee rotation schedules in order to reduce the number of employees in offices to curb the spread of the coronavirus.
And still with our news segment and moving to the United Nations, that said reports of strikes and mass killings of non-combatants in Ethiopia's Tigray region must be investigated and a full access granted to the independent investigators. We have more details in this story.
UN Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet said that reports of artillery strikes on civilians and mass killings of non-combatants in Ethiopia's Tigray region must be investigated and full access granted to independent investigators. The appeal by the High Commissioner for Human Rights follows 7 weeks of conflict in northern Ethiopia between central government soldiers and Tigray People's Liberation Front TPLF forces that has displaced tens of thousands. Bachelet said fighting is said to be continuing, particularly in some areas of north, central and southern Tigray. She highlighted how the lack of overall humanitarian access and ongoing communications blackout in many areas had continued to raise concerns about civilians. The High Commissioner said they have received allegations concerning violations of international humanitarian law and human rights law, including artillery strikes on populated areas, the deliberate targeting of civilians, extrajudicial killings, and widespread looting. She said although the government of Ethiopia had repeatedly alleged that the TPLF forces were involved in violations of international law, without access it remains challenging to verify these allegations. Citing many alleged atrocities, the UN Rights Chief pointed to the alleged mass killing of several hundred people, mainly Amharans, in the western Tigray town of Mai Kadra on the 9th of November. Meanwhile, the UNHCR on Tuesday launched an urgent appeal for $156 million to help 130,000 people affected by the ongoing violence in Tigray. Since fighting flared up in Tigray, more than 54,500 refugees have fled the Tigray region into Sudan.
And to wrap up our news segment, moving to the world of sports and to African football, Al Sahel will be the favorites to advance at the expense of Egypt's Arab contractors when they host them in Sousse in the second leg. Let's take a look at the details in this report.
Egypt's Arab contractors failed to take a first-leg advantage in their Confederation Cup first-round tie at home to Tunisia's Etoile Sahel, following a 0-0 draw in Cairo on Wednesday. Chances were at a premium in an affair which left the more experienced Etoile favorites to advance when they lost contractors in Sousse in the second leg. The hosts had some tame efforts throughout, while Etoile's solitary goal-scoring chance came in the 29th minute when veteran Tunisian forward Yassine Chekhaoui headed just wide from a corner. Contractors also had a penalty claim waved away by the referee a few minutes later after Burkinabe defender Farouk Kabore was tugged in the area. The video assistant referee VAR technology is not used in the Confederation Cup preliminary rounds. The Mountain Wolves are seeking to go far in Africa's secondary club competition in their first continental appearance in 15 years. Contractors, who finished fourth in the Egyptian Premier League last season after some solid displays, made a poor start to their new campaign after losing their opening 2 matches.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and to continue today's edition of Africa Today, we're delighted to be joined over the telephone by our guest this afternoon, Dr. Salah Abdallah, who will be talking to us more about the second wave of the coronavirus. A very good afternoon to you, Doctor.
Good afternoon. Welcome.
Thank you very much for joining us, sir. Now, of course, a lot is being said about the magnitude of the second wave of COVID-19. How do you see the situation in Egypt so far with regards to the coronavirus?
Well, of course, we started the era of the second attack for the coronavirus. And there is much talks about some mutation in the virus. And this is usually happens in all the viruses, not the corona alone. In Egypt, of course, we are much lucky than other countries, and Africa in general is lucky than other continents because the number of cases is is less than the cases in one country from the European country like Italy or like Britain or like France and so on. Of course, we can't talk about the United States because the cases there are too horrible, but we're just talking about Europe. In Egypt, of course, still the numbers are is not much. But this doesn't mean that we have to relax. No, we have to take all the conservative measures necessary to prevent the extension of the cases.
Yes.
And of course now we have experience from the first attack. So it will be easy for us to control ourselves in second attack, to avoid the collection of groups, to avoid the crowdness, to avoid the crowded area. Of course, the main infection is happening through breathing and through sneezing. So the mask is very important, and I think the mask must be used in all the methods of transport, whether buses or metro or trains or aeroplanes. Any method of transport where there is collection of people, the mask must be necessary, and we must be hard in this point.
Absolutely.
Because this is the main source of infection.
Yes.
The crowdedness and the breathing in a nearby distance.
Yes, absolutely. Now, let's talk a bit...
Cleaning the hands and cleaning the... we have a sunny weather, and this is one of our benefits, so we will be... we will see the sun every day for at least half an hour for every person, whether it was going to his work or if those who are staying at home, they can go out for just half an hour when the sun around 12, around 1 o'clock, the sun is good, and this will help. Of course, taking some of the vitamins is important, like vitamin D and like vitamin B.
Yes.
Using the alcohol and for washing the hands, and this is very important also to prevent the infection.
Absolutely. Doctor?
Of
Yes.
course, during the houses, better not to enter the houses with the shoes from the streets, because this can carry infection to the inside house. Of course, if we follow these instructions, I think the numbers will be within the limits, and the only dangerous period is January and February. This is the most dangerous period for the virus, because the weather in Egypt from
Yes.
March on will start to be more warm, and warm weather makes the virus less active. I don't say it will kill the virus, but it makes it less active.
Yes.
And this very good, because the infection will be less, the number will be less. Of course, the mortality
God willing.
will be
Yes.
less.
Right.
I
Dr.
think
Dr.
we can
Salah.
pass this period if we follow this
Precautions.
agenda.
Yes. Doctor, let's talk a bit about Dr. Ahmed Shawqi, who's a member of the scientific committee who's following the coronavirus situation in Egypt. He said in his recent statements that a new lockdown may be imposed if certain factors materialize together or simultaneously amid the peak of the second wave. How do you see this statement, and in your opinion, when would the peak be identified?
Can you tell me the statement again, please?
Yes, he said that a new lockdown may be imposed if certain factors appear or simultaneously arise. Now, the question, sir, is how do we decide when this peak will become identified?
Now, the question, sir, is how do we decide when this peak will become identified?
Dr.
Well,
Salah?
I think the scientists are working hardly now to realize the changes which happen in the virus. Of course, during the coming 2 months, January and February, the peak will be increased, and I think during that era, everything will be clear about this virus and about how can be treated. Of course, now we are reaching a level that there is a vaccine around the virus, many types of vaccines, and the world will start vaccination from, even some countries start already, the other will start from January on. So I think by the coming year and by the vaccination, the virus will be diminished to a great extent, and it will not be more than ordinary influenza, which happen
God
every year.
willing. Yes. Doctor, let's talk a bit about the vaccination and your expectations about the people's response for the calls of vaccinations, and how do you see the availability of the vaccinations to Egypt as well as the African continent at large?
Well, of course, the problem in the vaccinations is that they're talking too much about vaccination, and some people is afraid from the vaccination, and some people are talking about that it didn't take enough time for experience. Of course, the companies, there is a fight, secret fight between the companies, because, you know, every company have a vaccine and they want to spread it in the world, because it is milliards of dollars which will enter to these companies. But generally now, we have the Chinese
Vaccine, yes.
and we have the Pfizer vaccine. The Chinese vaccine is a dead virus, which is being used to stimulate the immunity in the human being. So that, in my opinion, that vaccine is more perfect than the other, at least because, you know, it's more safe. You are injecting a person with a dead vaccine, not with a live vaccine. The other is using attenuated vaccine.
Yes.
And there is difference between dead vaccine and attenuated vaccine. The dead vaccine is more safe to the human being. So that's why the Chinese vaccine which came to Egypt is not bad, and it can be used safely. There is nothing about it.
Yes.
Vaccination, of course, needed. And I think in the future, at least for coming 5 years, the traveling between the countries will have a certificate of vaccination against corona. You know, when I was traveling to Africa in the past few years,
Yes.
we have vaccination against yellow fever. So you have to take certificate with you that you are vaccinated from yellow fever. The same thing will happen to corona. Whenever you travel to Europe or travel to Africa or anyhow, you will have to take a certificate of vaccination from corona.
Right.
The vaccination will be widespread all the world, because at least if the world succeeded in vaccinating 50% of the population, this means that the infection will be dropped to less than 50%.
Half. Absolutely.
And it will be finished.
Yes.
So there will be, this year, there will be spread in vaccination in all Africa. Of course, Egypt, I think, and maybe South Africa will be the first countries to start the vaccination.
Yes.
But the other countries will follow gradually according to the production of vaccination from the factories. And of course, according to the rich countries which will buy the vaccination for the poor countries. You know,
Yes.
African countries, most of them are poor.
Well, they
so
are,
they
yeah,
will
well,
wait
yes.
for vaccination
Yes.
as a gift from the health organization,
The producers,
and from
yes.
the rich countries.
Right.
But I think within 21, vaccination will start in all Africa, and of course it will finish in Egypt, because Egypt will start early in vaccination.
Right. I'd like to thank you very, very much, Dr. Salah Abdallah, our political analyst and our guest for this afternoon. Thank you so much, Doctor, for your insight and for joining us today. And that wraps up today's edition of Africa Today. You were in the company of myself, Angie Meher. Many thanks for watching.